And we welcome you back to another edition of the Jersey K Podcast. Dennis Brown, your host. And today we are going to be joining historic Cold Spring Village to talk a little bit about the history they have there. And to remind you that there's so much more to do at the Jersey Cape than just the beaches and the boardwalks. As people start to make their plans for 2019, I know it seems, you think about summer, but, many motels, this is the time of season that they're booking large chunks of their rooms because people want to make sure they get their specific weeks or weekends in when they want to come back for certain events or things that go on down the Jersey Cape, and they want to get their reservations in for those events. So people are making their plans now, but there's a lot to do besides just, the beaches and the boardwalks. Historical sites are so important. Birding is huge. Of course, the Cape May County Zoo is something we've talked about before, but again, that's a huge attraction. Hundreds of thousands of people visit throughout the year, and it's not on the beaches or boardwalks. But we have a lot of great historical sites, whether it's Naval Air Station Wildwood, historic Cold Spring Village. We talked about some of the great sites down in Cape May. Mac down in Cape May does some great tours with some of the history that they have going on there. So really, if you're looking for something different, a little unique, whether it's the Lookout Tower, World War II Lookout Tower, the Lighthouse, Cape May Lighthouse, then there's the lighthouse at Hereford Inlet as well. Sometimes they do some, especially when there's full moons out, you can check their dates. Well, they'll have the ability to climb the tower there and look out on the water, which is an amazing sight to see at the lighthouse there. There's so much history and so much to really take in Cape May County that, you can create a day trip or two, or, make a day of your vacation where you just go see some historical sites, learn a little bit more about the history and some of the great parts that Cape May County played in the history of the United States, New Jersey, and the whole nine. So historic Cold Spring Village, I'm really excited to go check that out. And we'll learn a little bit more about what they have to offer in just a couple of minutes. We do want to remind you that there are still some great holiday events that are taking place this time of year. Next weekend in the Wildwoods, they're going to have their Christmas parade and Christmas in the Plaza, which is a new Christmas event that will be taking place at Byrne Plaza. It's they just opened the plaza this year. It's on Pacific Avenue. Lots of people have been checking it out with the events that they have there, and it's really been a big addition to the Wildwoods there. And this event will have, some different things like ice skating and fire pits, and Santa will be there. The parade is a great annual tradition in the Wildwoods, so you definitely want to check that out. Also next weekend, Santa's Family Workshop on the 8th at the Cape May County Zoo from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We talked about some of the things you can do off the beaches and boardwalks. The zoo great all year. You can get your pictures of Santa, Mrs. Claus. Also take some individual pics with the kids, enjoy crafts, candy, music, a scavenger hunt, and a whole lot more all there. And also the historic Dennisville Christmas House Tour, which takes place December 15th from 4 to 8 p.m. on the third Saturday of each December. Minimum of 8 homeowners open their beautifully decorated homes to the tour, and you can really get your holiday season into full gear with that. You can check out their website at dhhoa.org. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come right back with our interview at the historic Cold Spring Village on the Jersey Cape Podcast. We're back here on the Jersey Cape Podcast. It's Dennis Brown. Jim Stevens here with us with historic Cold Spring Village. First off, Jim, thanks for a few minutes today.
My pleasure, Dennis. I'm happy to chat with you.
Now, historic Cold Spring Village is a really fantastic living, breathing kind of feeling when you come here and take the family. I've been here a few times with my family over the years. Right on Route 9. If you could kind of summarize, because what we like to do with this series is it's really trying to aim at the people that might not be familiar. Maybe they come down for the beaches, maybe they've come for the zoo, but trying to push them to maybe something that they haven't tried before. If you could kind of synopsize what is historic Cold Spring Village for somebody who hasn't been here, what would you say to them?
Absolutely. Historic Cold Spring Village is truly unique. What we are is a 30-acre nonprofit early American living history museum. And if folks haven't heard that term living history before, what that means is this. Some museums you might have gone to might have had a large number of interesting displays, maybe behind glass in a case, but there was no one there to talk to you about them or show you how those things worked. At a living history museum, what we try to do is bring the past to life and show you the way that you would have lived had you lived in this area about 200 years ago in the early 1800s, the early American era. And this is the way that your ancestors would have lived and did live back at that time as well. And in each of our buildings, you will find people in period clothing demonstrating various aspects of life at that time.
Now, obviously, you're here really talking about historic Cold Spring Village, but, we do talk a little bit about some general stuff. And here in the Cape May County in New Jersey, we're kind of uniquely positioned historically with a lot of great, sites because of, the history, over 325 years as a county. Obviously, you're gonna have some history that, if you're looking for that on a vacation, Cape May County can really provide for you. If you could talk a little bit about that as well, because, I'm sure the people that are coming to historic Cold Spring Village might be interested in some of these other sites as well, if you're looking for that history, and how great it is to kind of have some of these different sites that people can kind of bounce between and, go see something different on a vacation.
Sure. Well, first, let me just mention a couple of things about the village. You mentioned how our long history here in Cape May County, we have the oldest surviving structure in the county here at historic Cold Spring Village, and visitors can come to see it. It's this Cox Hall Cottage, built in 1691 as part of a much larger structure named Cox Hall that was built to be a home for the colonial governor of West Jersey, Dr. Daniel Cox, who served in that position from 1687 to 1692. Later on in its history, the section that we have was separated from the main part of the building and became a small farm home. An interesting fact about Cox Hall as it relates to the county's history. After Cape May County was founded in November of 1692, the very first session of court ever held in Cape May County is known for a fact to have been held in March of 1693 in Cox Hall. So that kind of technically makes Cox Hall the original Cape May courthouse.
That's really interesting. Now, one of the additions that recently came to historic Cold Spring Village, we were just talking before we jumped on here, was the brewery that you all have built. And what's awesome about the brewery, and there's a lot of great breweries around, but this one really does transport you back in time. It fits the village, as you mentioned, living history. Mm-hmm. So you can still enjoy, something a little bit new on the craft beer, but also, feel like you're transported back in time and, maybe have that feeling of being at a, an old school kind of bar. If you could talk a little bit about that addition, because, obviously it's helped the village, but it's also, provided another unique way for people to kind of take in historical elements.
Sure. Craft breweries, of course, have become very popular over the last couple of decades. And historic Cold Spring Village's Cold Spring Brewery, its official name, is the only nonprofit microbrewery in all of New Jersey, possibly in the entire United States. We opened it in July of 2016 as a way of supporting our mission of historic preservation and historic education. For example, during the off-season, we do large numbers of programs for schools in Cape May County, and we will visit any school in Cape May County free of charge. And one of the things that allows us to do that are the funds that are raised through our brewery. And the brewery itself is built into a historic three-bay English-style barn that was constructed in 1804. Thomas Jefferson was president of the United States when the barn that is our brewery was built. And what's interesting, it was built in a style called heavy timber frame construction. Basically, entire trees were cut down, squared off with broad axes and adzes. Holes were bored in the ends with augers, handheld drills, held the pieces together. You can still see the tool marks on the beams that were made by the carpenters in 1804 when they built that barn. And it has wonderful atmosphere in there. That's one compliment we get quite often, as well as the beer. We have a wide variety of beers on tap, usually from about 6 to 8 different varieties, depending on when you visit. Some seasonally, some that we always have on there. But it's a great asset for the village, and if you enjoy microbrewed beer, please stop by. The brewery is open all year around. So even when the village's historic buildings, which are only open from mid-June to mid-September, the brewery itself, which is located by our Seashore Road entrance, is open 12 months a year.
Well, it's crazy to think, but we're getting to that time of year where people start planning their vacations again for next year. There are a lot of people do, start to get their weeks in at this point. I mean, I have friends who own motels and, they're already booking for next year. You have a great calendar of events. If we sat and talked about every weekend, we'd probably be here, till next week. But what are a few of the highlights, things that are favorites of yours on the calendar of events that, if somebody really wanted to, come for the first time and really get a great feel for historic Cold Spring Village, what would you say?
Well, we will begin our 2019 summer season on Father's Day weekend, June 15th and 16th, with a military timeline. For those not familiar with what that is, it's sort of a reenactment, but rather than just one time period, it's multiple time periods. At our military timeline, we have had over the years everything from reenactors representing Roman legionnaires all the way up to American troops during the Vietnam War and everything in between. So you really get a good look at what military life was like throughout the ages. Another popular event, the end of June, the 22nd and 23rd of June, our Quilt and Fiber Art Show. That's another very popular event. Our Celtic Festival, which is a big draw, that will take place on the 13th and 14th of July. Our Classic Car Show will be August 3rd and 4th. Seafarers Weekend, which is extremely popular. We have several groups of pirate reenactors, among others, that are featured at that. That'll be the 24th and 25th of August. And our last event of the summer season, one of our most popular events, Civil War Weekend, which features a battle reenactment both days at 2 p.m., that will take place on the weekend of September 14th and 15th. And from June 25th through September 1st, we will be open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Now, a lot of people know, these types of attractions, they come down in the summer mostly to see these things. And, we obviously down here in Cape May County, we have gotten more visitors in the fall and things like that. But, the bulk of the people come down here in the summer. They don't always think about the hard work that goes in these off seasons to get everything, to make it as presentable as it is in the summer. What do you all do at this time of year? Because a lot of people just assume, oh well, they close up and they're done, but there's a lot of work that goes in to prepping everything and putting everything on so that when everybody comes back, like you mentioned, for Father's Day weekend and all, you're ready to go.
Well, we're fortunate in that we have a very loyal and talented interpretive staff. And most of the people that our visitors see here in the summer are just seasonal. They only work here in the summer months, the people you see in the buildings in period clothing, demonstrating home life and various trades. But we generally don't have to hire too many new people because many of them have been with us for many years. But planning events begins as soon as the season ends. For example, I mentioned Civil War Weekend. The next Civil War Weekend will be next September. I've already sent out the registration materials to the reenactment groups for next year's event, because I know the reenactors start planning their calendars in January and February, and we want to be on their list. So we start planning for the following summer as soon as the previous summer season has ended. So this is an ongoing process all year long. So quite a bit of work does go in to planning all of these events that we do.
And how many total buildings, like roughly? I mean, you might not know off the top of your head, but what's the approximate amount of buildings here? Because there's at least, I would say a dozen or so.
Yeah. If you include the outbuildings, many of which are historic in their own right, there's 27 of them altogether. The oldest, as I mentioned earlier, is the Cox Hall Cottage, which was built in 1691, almost 328 years ago. It'll be 328 in 2019. The youngest of them is the Cold Spring Grange Restaurant, which was built as the meeting place for Cold Spring Grange 132, which was the local chapter of a national farmers organization called the Patrons of Husbandry. That was built in 1912. So we've got quite a wide variety of ages, but the bulk of our buildings were built in the 19th century. One quick interesting fact about some of our older buildings, several of them, including the Brewery, the Cox Hall Cottage, our country store, and the Spicer Leeming House, where we do many demonstrations of home life. In 1821, those buildings all survived what is estimated to have been a Category 4 hurricane that struck Cape May County on September 3rd, 1821, and was remembered by those who survived it as the Great September Gale. So that really speaks to just how well made these buildings were, that they remained standing through such a powerful storm. So just another little interesting fact, one of many you can learn if you come and visit us at Historic Cold Spring Village.
One last question along the lines of the buildings. I mean, obviously, anything that's built, as well made as it might be, there's always need to, sometimes to do some rehabs or, make sure everything is, up to date as it needs to be to make sure it's safe and all. What is the process? Because, you have to keep the historical elements, but at the same time, there are eventually things you need to do to just, make sure everything is safe and put together well. How's that process as you all, try to maintain the history but also things need updating it so often?
We're fortunate in that there are granting agencies that we've been able to go to apply for funds to help us with maintaining our historic structures. Also, as I mentioned previously as well, the income that we get year-round from our microbrewery also assists with that. The bulk of the work maintaining our buildings is done in the off-season, naturally, when we don't have our visitors around. But it's a constant ongoing process because, as I've mentioned, they are quite old and they are wooden. And like any wooden structure, they do need a lot of work to remain in good shape. The roofs have to be replaced from time to time. The shingles need replacing. Windowsills will start to rot out. So we constantly are inspecting our buildings and replacing things as needed. And we are fortunate in having a very talented grounds and buildings maintenance staff who are able to do much of that work themselves. And what they can't do themselves, we have some contractors who specialize in working on older structures like this who are able to help us keep them in top condition and looking historically accurate.
Well, I really appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for giving us some time today, and we certainly encourage everybody to come check out Historic Cold Spring Village next summer. But as you mentioned, they can visit the brewery year-round to start get that feel of everything that they have going on here. And again, right off Route 9, you can't miss it. It's I say, very well worth coming out to see.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you very much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll be right back here on the Jersey K Podcast. We want to thank Historic Cold Spring Village for the time today, talking a little bit about what they have to offer there. Again, they'll be open next summer, so you want to make your plans, check out their full calendar of events, figure out, what weekends you want to be there. Go to hcsv.org for Historic Cold Spring Village. They have so much to offer there, and we really appreciate their time today. We want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll have more Jersey Cape podcasts in the coming weeks. Make sure you subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts, whether it's Google, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or any of the other great mediums. We even put it on Facebook at our Facebook page for the Jersey Cape. Make sure you find it there. And we hope you have and enjoy this great holiday season here at the Jersey Cape.